Hello, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Owen James, the channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news. Well, I just want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the club at this moment in time, the present situation around the club, just everything that is kind of happening. Look, I think, we all recognise, well, not all of us, but I think there's a substantial proportion of the fan base now that recognise that Philippe Clement is probably not the man to take this club forward, and he will, I think, survive till the end of the season. And I think at the end of the season, hopefully, someone will show some balls and some brains and actually show him the door. As to who the next man would be, I don't know. I haven't really looked into it yet. But I think, in terms of the club, I think the problems are far more fundamental than one man. They are far more deep rooted than just one person. The situation this club finds itself in is not just down to Philippe Clement. It is down to a massive mismanagement since 2012, basically, since the journey back. I think in terms of the club, in terms of the way the club has come back from the brink, I think there's a lot of very bad decisions have been made by the people in charge of the club over the years. And I'm not going to come on here and be pro Dave King. I'm not going to be pro Douglas Park or pro whoever. I think they've all made some massive fundamental errors. Now, I do think that there are some people who are more to blame than others. I think, the Park family are a massive issue within the club. I do think the Park family do need to be removed from the club. I think the sooner that Douglas and Graham Park are gone from Rangers, the better for Rangers. I do think they are an absolute virus that just drags this club down. Douglas Park was the chairman post 55. Stephen Gerrard spoke about the needing to, fix the roof while the sun was shining. And we had a historic opportunity after 55 to, not let Celtic get back up off the canvas, to invest in the playing squad, to invest in the club and put this club back on top of Scottish football again. But Douglas Park, Stuart Robertson as well, who's absolutely useless, threw that opportunity away, obviously in conjunction with Ross Wilson as well. So, the club had the chance back in 2020, 2021 to really rebuild and really, put its foot down and accelerate away. But it kind of, the wheels came off, the handbrake broke, the engine fell out, and it all kind of fell apart a little bit. There's been some exceptionally bad appointments of managers over the time. There's been some non-backing of managers. Stephen Gerrard wasn't backed. I think had Gerrard been sufficiently backed post 55, I don't think he goes to Villa as soon as he does. I don't think Gio gets sacked if he's properly backed in that transfer window, and the players that he actually wanted were brought in, not the players that Ross Wilson wanted brought in. I think the appointment of Michael Beale was an absolute disaster for this club. It set the club back 18 months to 2 years. Obviously, that transfer window of Beale is one that has really ruined the squad. The fact that he brought in players, who were just simply not good enough, who've just gone on to prove that they are simply not good enough. The Sam Lammers, the Cyril Dessers of this world, and eating up a lot of wages and a lot of money, really set Rangers back. Clement has obviously come in. I don't think he's done a great job either. He, hasn't really taken the club forward. He hasn't got us playing great football. He hasn't got us, competing to win trophies again, which is what this club is all about. But I do think that a lot of the fundamental issues that are underlying this club go back to the top of the organisation, go back to the top of the board. You look at the Rangers board members, you look at the likes of Alistair Johnston, Julian Walhart, John Halstead, Douglas or Graham Park, whichever person is actually pulling the strings there. Obviously, John Bennett has stepped down now. You've got a lot of people there with a lot of money who don't seem to be overly interested in actually competing for trophies, who don't seem to want to move this club forward. I had a little bit of digging into net worths of these individuals. Now, people say, these guys have made their money in business, they've been successful in business, why would they want to throw it all away in a football club? Well, I think, realistically, if you invest in a football club, if you buy into a football club, then you've got to be willing to put your money where your mouth is. You've got to be willing to stump up cash to back the club, to move the club forward. Or else, why would you get involved? I think, I know why they get involved. But I think, with the likes of John Halstead, with the likes of Julian Walhart, with the likes of Douglas and Graham Park, with the likes of Alistair Johnston, I think a lot of it is about the status. I think a lot of it is about being a Rangers board member, wearing the Rangers blazer, wearing the Rangers tie, being able to sit in your nice comfy boardroom seat and then getting your nice dinner and drinks and God knows what else all paid for at the club's expense. half time and full time. I don't think it's realistically about the actual improvement of the club. You look into it and you look into the net worth of these individuals. Julian Walhart, who is one of the exec directors of the club, is worth 2 billion. His net worth is 2 billion. So Walhart, who is involved with the club, has a net worth of 2 billion. That's a substantial amount of money. That is very much a substantial amount, and that's £2 billion. That's not $2 billion. John Halstead, who is also involved with the club and on the board, is has a net worth of 1.5 billion pounds. Douglas Park, or the Park family, which I think this is kind of embarrassing. I mean, obviously not to us. I mean, if we had this much money, we wouldn't be laughing. But is worth 399 million, which in comparison to Walhart and Halstead is just pocket change. I couldn't find anything on Alistair Johnson. I dig around. I know that he's worth a substantial amount of cash, but you look at those net worth of these individuals, and you kind of consider, why do we struggle so much financially? Now, I know FFP and FSP or PPM or whatever it's called these days, FFP, PSR, it's got so many different names now, comes into being. I get that. I understand that. But, for the fact that we seem to constantly struggle to have money, constantly struggle to pay for players, constantly struggle to be able to bring players in, or pay wages or pay whatever it is, it's quite embarrassing, really, when you've got guys on your board who are this wealthy. What I would argue is that, if these guys genuinely aren't interested in the club and aren't interested in the club moving forward, or making progress, then, they need to sell up. They need to move out. They need to go. They need to make way for someone who is willing to come in, who is willing to take over, who is willing to put money into the club. Dave King spoke, didn't he, about the fact that he had people who were interested in investing in the club. How true that is, I don't know. You've always got to take what Dave King says with a pinch of salt. Dave King has his critics, of course he does, and yes, he's done some pretty stupid things when he was involved with Rangers as chairman. But look, the situation is what it is. We are in a position now where we are going into a January transfer window where we do need to spend money. We do need to improve the playing squad. And I get and I understand that we are not going to go and splash 20, 30, 40, 50 million pounds, because it would be financial suicide. Understand that. And before anyone comes on here and criticizes and says, yeah, but Owen, why are you asking to spend so much money? They haven't got the money. We can't. FFP. I'm not asking for a massive amount of money to be spent. I am not asking us to go out and spend 30 million, 20 million. I'm not asking us to go and spend 10 million on a player, 15 million on a player. What I'm looking at is buying in players like Katic, 1.5 mil, 1.25 mil, Cameron, 600,000, 800,000, a mil max. Players like this, a striker for say 1.5, 2, 3 maximum. I'm not looking for vast sums of money here. What I'm looking for is them to kind of show a little bit of ambition. Now, last January, we were in a position where we could have kicked on and won the league. We really were. If the board had spent a little bit of extra cash in January rather than just loans and free transfers, then who's to say that we couldn't have kicked on and won the league? If we'd say gone and bought Lawrence Shankland for 1.5, 3, 4 million pound, who's to say we couldn't have kicked on and won the league? I'm not saying I'm just saying like Lawrence Shankland. You've got to be so careful what you say on here, because you just get absolutely slaughtered for making any sort of comment. But the board, for me, are a fundamental part of what the problem is at the club. They run the club so very, very badly. You look at the situation at Rangers, and you look at the fact that for a long time they allowed us to go without a CEO. They allowed us to go without a chairman. They allowed the club to drift, in effect. And they allowed the club to drift at a critical time. During that summer. During that summer when we had no CEO, during the start of the season, obviously after John Bennett stepped down, there was that period of drift. And you, as a professional organisation, as a professional business organisation, as a professional football club, you cannot continue to do that. Change needs to come. And like I've said, I think the issue we've got is that the board are a big part of what the issue is at this club. The fact that they will not invest enough money to bring the club forward. They will not invest in the playing squad. Now, people say, well, they've done great paying off the debt. And yes, thank you very much for that. That's great. But the issue is you are always going to have that debt and those issues if you don't improve your product. Now, if Rangers were to improve the product on the field, to develop the product on the field, to qualify for the Champions League regularly, to bring in players under a proper trading model who are going to develop, then there will be no need for the investors to put money in to pay off debt, because the debt will be gone. If you are getting regular Champions League money every season, and you're talking 15, 20, 25, 30 million pounds a season from the Champions League, you are generating 50, 60, 70, 80 million pounds in player sales, or whatever, 20 million, 30 million in player sales, whatever it is. Then you're going to be bringing in somewhere in the region of 50, 60, 80 million pounds a season. You're not going to need to pay off debt, because debt will not exist. You will have a situation where the club becomes more self-sufficient because it's got a trading model that brings in money. It's got a Champions League income revenue stream. Look across the city. At the same time we made 17 million pound loss, I think they made 17 million pound profit. That is because they have a trading model that works and they play regular Champions League football. The blueprint is there. And as much as I don't want to praise them and don't want to say, well done, Celtic, they're doing the right things. And we need to be moving towards that model, and doing what they're doing to generate the income. Now, like I've said on multiple videos, we are no longer in a position where we can buy who we want. We can hang on to players ad infinitum. The days of having players like Brian Laudrup, Paul Gascoigne, the De Boer brothers, Arthur Newman, Lovenkrantz, Albert, Rickson, Gattuso, those types of players are gone, unfortunately. As much as I would love to be signing the likes of Cody Gakpo, and I'd love to sign the likes of Xavi Simons, and I'd love to sign the likes of Cole Palmer. It's never going to happen anymore. It will never happen. Rangers will never be in that position again. But that's not to say that we can't invest in and bring in decent quality players who A, will develop and be saleable assets, and B, will become leaders on the park and are short-term assets. You have to have that mix to be able to move forward. And at this moment in time, we do not have that mix. We do not have that ability to move forward, because the trading model is very much in its infancy, if it's all taking off, because of the fact that we're not bringing in. How they expect to set up a trading model when they're not going to spend money on players, I don't get. Also, the fact that we are lacking in leadership on the park. We have too many passengers out there, the Dowells, the Towers, the Matondos, etc., etc. We need to do that. But getting back to my main point, it is a situation where the board are not moving this club forward. They are making mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. And what I'm saying realistically is, if they cannot take this club forward, if they cannot move this club into a position to be regularly in the Champions League, and I think we've got to get away from this Europa League is our standard crap. It's rubbish. It's shit. It's not the way forward. As a club, realistically, we are not going to win European trophies, because of the fact you have English clubs that make billions. You have Spanish clubs. You have German clubs. You have Dutch clubs, Italian clubs, who are very rich and have more money, more playing talent, etc., etc. So realistically, forget it. We need to be in the Champions League to generate income, and it drives me absolutely berserk when I hear Rangers fans saying, I don't want to be in the Champions League because we're going to get hammered every week. I'd rather be in the Europa League. Well, then you're condemning the club to mediocrity. You're condemning the club to financial mediocrity, and you're condemning the club to actually never being in a position to be able to compete with Celtic again. The UEFA Champions League will exist as a cash cow for Celtic. It will exist as a cash cow for us. Celtic are never going to win the Champions League. We will never win the Champions League. At the end of the day, there are only 4 or 5 teams in the world who can win the Champions League. You're talking the likes of Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Realistically, they're the only teams who can win the Champions League. And you'll see over the next 10 years, a rotation, I think, of those teams winning the Champions League. Manchester United, possibly, if they ever get back on their feet. But we need to be in a position where we are regularly in the Champions League. It's not about competing. It's not about doing well in the Champions League. It's about getting the cash. It's about getting the money. And if we can win the odd game here and there against some of the lower lights in Europe, the Young Boys of this world, the Bruges of this world, the Casino Salzburg, the RB Salzburgs, the Feyenoord of this world, and we get hammered by Liverpool, we get hammered by Real Madrid and by Barcelona, so be it, as long as we are generating income, which brings in the club and develops the club. And like I said, when I hear fans talk about, I don't want to be in the Champions League, I want to be in the Europa League, I'm seriously drives me absolutely fucking doolally. It shows a lack of ambition, in my opinion. I think, like I said, though, the board need to change. If this board, at the end of the day, cannot take us forward, are not willing to invest in this club, and by the club, I mean in the playing squad, to take the club forward, then they need to be replaced. And I think the biggest ones that obviously need to go are the Park family. They've got to be got rid of. The club have not advanced with the Park family involved. The Park family are obviously, look, the Park family are not rich. They are rich, but they're not rich in football terms. They're not Woolhart rich. They're not Halstead rich. They're not Manchester City owners rich. They're not Liverpool owners rich. They're not Arsenal, Stan Kroenke rich. They're not that sort of rich. They have £399 million net worth, most of which probably goes on food and buffets and takeaways, judging by the size of the pair of them. But look, I mean, it is a situation where clearly the board are not fit for purpose. Clearly the board are not moving this club forward. It needs to change. It's got to change. And I think until it changes at the very top, nothing else can be right. We do need a new manager. Of course we do. Clement's not the man. But the problem is, if you are a manager and you are sitting looking at Rangers Football Club and you are sitting there with ambition to be successful, you are going to say, well, why should I go there? Why would I want to go there when they're not going to give me the money? They're not going to back me. And then the fans are going to get on my back because the team's playing shit because I haven't got good enough players. Or the best I can do is I can organise them, get them playing football, but we're probably going to finish second to Celtic. We might win the league once every 5 years. We may sneak into the Champions League once every so often, but majority of the time we're going to be in the Europa League. Why would a manager want to come? If you're an ambitious manager, you look at it and you go, well, yeah, it's a great club. It's a massive club. It's a club that if you do a great job at, you're probably made for life. But at the same token, you've got a board who aren't backing you, a board who aren't behind you. So, what managers want when they go to clubs is the commitment from a board and the commitment from the people at the top to back them, to give them the opportunity to succeed. Now, if you're asking a manager to come in and you're asking him to do his job with one hand tied behind his back and both his legs tied together, he ain't going to want to come. No self-respecting manager, no, even if they're ex-Rangers, is going to want to come and want to manage the club. And that's down to the board's mismanagement, lack of investment, lack of ambition. I'll be honest with you. I look at the situation. And I look at the board, and I honestly believe they're happy with how things are at this moment in time. Why are they happy? Because we get into Europe every season. We play in Europe. We make money from Europe, and they get money, and they're happy. They're not bothered if we win it. They genuinely couldn't give a stuff if we win the Scottish Cup or the Scottish League. They genuinely are not interested in the Scottish League or the Scottish Cup or competing in Scotland or winning the Scottish Premier League 9 in a row, 10 in a row, whatever. All they're interested in is what money they can get, and the way they make money is by getting into Europe. The squad this year is set up to play in Europe. That's what it's for. That's why it's probably doing so badly in Scotland. But the issue is very much that the board themselves lack any ambition. They're happy to accept mediocrity as long as they make money from Europe. That is the big problem with this board. They don't have the ambition to take the club forward. They are only interested in what they can get out of it. They're interested in treating Rangers like a big ATM. Take out money from the club, do well in Europe, enjoy the status, enjoy the blazers, enjoy the food and the drink and the partying, enjoy the trips around Europe, the all expenses paid trips around Europe. That's what they're here for. And I think until everybody starts to realise that, and everybody starts to, get behind people like the Union Bears, who a number of times have put banners up in the stadium, decrying the board and saying it's time for them to go, calling out the Park family, until that actually happens, where the fan base as a whole go and they call out the board, they call out the Park family, they say, get the hell out of our club, and force this club to be sold to someone who is ambitious for the future of this club. Nothing is ever going to change at this club. And people, say that we don't want to be owned by one person. I couldn't give a shit. If we are owned by one person, as long as that person is willing to take this club forward and advance this club, I don't care if we're owned by one person, 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, as long as those people are prepared to invest and move the club forward and make the right decisions to move the club forward. Something this present board have proven time after time after time they are not able to do. They're not able to do. They are simply, every decision they make is a bad one. They've signed off on some of these awful contracts. They've made these managerial appointments. They've allowed Celtic to get this far ahead of us. They haven't invested in players at the right time. They've made bad decisions about the stadium expansion, bad decisions about the Edmiston House overspend, bad decisions about Australia, bad decisions about the sports bar hold-up, bad decisions about so much stuff. You know, in proper private industry, this board would have been sacked by people. If they were actual managers and not investors, they would have been sacked for gross incompetence. It's the way it is, guys. I am worried that the club will not move forward because of the board. And like I said, until the fundamental change comes at the very top of this organisation, nothing changes at Rangers, and nothing will change at Rangers. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts, your opinions on what I've had to say on this video. Thanks for watching. As always, guys, on the way out, please smash the like, sub, comment, share, all that brilliant stuff for me. Thanks for watching. I'll speak to you very soon here on the channel. We are the people.